Hi, this is Kralik and welcome to Gamers Explain. On today's episode, I asked a number of people, 9 or 10 even, the same question. And that question was, how do you deal with games that are flagging or lagging or going on at a pace that you're unhappy with? What should you do? These are their answers. It's pronounced Kalajel. Your first 5 Torches deep game, we had this long travel mechanic and montage, and then a couple players left after a few weeks of were unhappy with the pace, and in that case, I think discussed it with the players, and we wrapped it up, and there was a problem. There was a problem player in that game for sure that I butted heads with, certainly. But what other what tips do you have for dealing with a game that just isn't working or seems to be in trouble?
Bring it up, talk about it. There's really no other way around this. We're all adults, supposedly. So we can discuss things rationally around the table, whether it's a real table or a virtual one. So yeah, you bring it up, you discuss it, and either you're gonna find a solution and you're gonna fix it, or you're gonna all agree to part ways, and that's pretty much all there is to it.
Yeah. If you've had a game that's slowed down and you're unhappy with the pace, maybe you've got a player that just isn't responding in a timely fashion, and that could be me. But how do you change that pace? How do you change the normal, do you think? Same thing, just talk about it?
Yeah, well, usually, it depends if I'm a player or a GM, but usually I'm gonna try and not talk about it right now, because you don't really know what's happening. It might be only temporary, it might be a recurring problem, but I'm usually gonna bring attention to it. Like, if I'm a player, I'm gonna be like, are we waiting after someone? If I'm the GM, I'm gonna try to push to have the adventure continue a little bit despite the slower player. Like, okay, well, this happened, like I said, and if it's recurring, it's really causing a problem, and eventually I'm gonna bring it up. There's one, I won't name any name, but there's currently one player in my Frontier Space game that is really dragging the game right now. I'm probably going to have to bring it up eventually. Was bringing the game to such an extent that it was affecting you, because the character you originally made was that character's property.
Yeah.
You were a robot that belonged to that other character, and because that other player has such long hiatus from time to time, it affected you because you basically couldn't play your character.
Yeah, there is only so much autonomy I can fake.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So next up, Lavtodd. But how do you deal with games that are flagging?
I haven't posted in Manifest Destiny in a month. It really depends on expectations. So like in our game, I think most of us are, go through busy phases and are pretty chill about just kind of, it's never been that fast paced. So we're all okay with letting it sit for a little bit. I'm a big fan of the time skip, just so that, if everybody's bored with a scene, let's just move past it. Let's hit reset. But two, sometimes you just got to admit it's not working and end it. And it sucks because, you know, you've got these ideas, you've got these characters, you want it to work, but it's not worth beating a dead horse over it. And that's where talking with the players really comes in handy. Because a lot of times you'll find out, oh yeah, well, we're in the busy season for work and I've got exams soon. And it's not that people don't like it. It's just that there is no momentum left and we're not going to pick it up for a while. Let's just shelve those characters in the realm of characters we'd love to play someday and move on.
Yeah.
And I've had to do that more often than I've finished games. But that happens in real life too, so it's fine.
Yeah, I think for that very reason, a lot of people on Play by Post end up pointing themselves towards shorter scenarios. It's like, let's user KCC ran a Call of Cthulhu game for a bunch of us, and it ended up being a pretty high speed. Everybody posted a couple times a day, and we finished this entire scenario in a month. And then we ended it. That was the end of the game. It's like we did this adventure and we're done. I mean, once you've done that, like you've seen the characters go through their paces. You got to the end of something. It didn't just like peter off because a couple people haven't posted in a month, or somebody left and moved to a place that doesn't have the internet or something.
Well, and I think as a GM, having an episodic system, at least for kind of your basic structure, is really important, because then if you do keep it going, there are like clear points where you're kind of hitting a mental reset and you get to kind of like, all right, now we're starting a new plot point. And like you can have these overarching concepts going on, because again, the note taking in Play by Post is really nice, but just having these regular checkpoints where you're starting something new, I think helps keep it fresh, or at least provides flexibility if it's not.
We've tried that as a live group, as having like a central point. Maybe it's a beloved town or tavern, right? And so adventures will start there, and then you could pass off the GM reins to somebody else, and they'll start in the same spot. So the players have all kind of ended there. Theoretically, they're building relationships with the townsfolk, and it gives you a way to swap out characters if you get tired of your mushroom-based monk, or realize that managing a wizard spellbook is just too much. Or the old GM can now has a character they can bring in.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm playing an artificer right now. I have 4 spells, and that's already too much.
So now, Falconloft. Any tips for figuring out or repairing or even just abandoning games that aren't working right? You've started it off. Maybe it seemed good at the beginning, but now it's not working.
Well, communication is really going to be the key there too, because you may feel like it's not working. I've been in a couple of games that I thought weren't working at all, and I'll go and ask the players about it. I'm like, no, we're fine with it. We're having fun. And then there's other games where I thought it was working fine, and a player will come to me and say, hey, I'm just not really enjoying this. And so you can't be too quick to interpret things through your own perceptions. You've got to talk to the players and see what their perceptions of it are too. And a lot of times, once you do that and you can identify the thing that isn't just not working, it's usually just one thing. You change that thing and it's fine. But you also can't become real overly attached to a game either, because it may be the game you've wanted to run for years, and you may have gotten a group together for it, and it's just not the right group. It's just the players are not as into it as you are, and it might be better just to drop it and try to start it again later when you've had more time to think about it. But whatever the case is, talking to the players and getting their viewpoint on it is going to be key to whatever it is, because just because you feel like something isn't working doesn't mean that it's not working. It just means that that's how it feels to you, and the players may be just fine.
Yeah, so we're in a 4th edition game together, which is really slow, just amazingly slow. And I think we're getting to the point where what I promised at the beginning, which is the intrigue level of play, is you're really starting to get the foundations of that together. But it's also just really slow, and I'm not sure if that's partly neglecting it, or if it's just we've adopted that pace. It's probably worth checking in on the other players as well, and just seeing what we can do to make sure everybody's playing the same game they want to.
Yeah, I actually had noticed it going a little slower than I expected, but I haven't been bothered by it. Part of that is because I've had so little time lately. I've gone from having 3-4 free hours at work every day to maybe having 1.5, and so there's a lot of stuff. Like I used to do all of my posting at work. Just whenever stuff would slow down, I would jump on it and do some of it, and then I would do a little bit, and then it'd slow down again, and I'd jump on and do some more. And now it seems like I'm struggling to make 2 or 3 game posts a day, and there have been weeks where I've been able to do 2 or 3 for the entire week. So I don't mind the game going slower myself. And I suspect that there's a lot of people feeling that way now, especially with everything ramping up for the holidays and everybody having those extra family and social expectations that are happening.
Here's Harrigan. How do you navigate that?
Well, I'll tell you what, it goes back to one of the first questions you asked, which is what's the differences between playing live and playing play-by-post. It's way easier to tell live. You can ask people, you can do the session afterward to say, how's everybody doing? What did you like? Stars and wishes, swords and or roses and thorns type of stuff. You can do that in play-by-post too. Because what my main point is going to be here is understand the root cause of what's going wrong with the game. Is it the speed? Are 2 players having a conflict? Did someone arrive with a different set of expectations and they're getting unhappy with the tone of the game or the subject matter or whatever? So there's a whole bunch of stuff you can do up front to I think to help ensure success, which ranges from play with the right people to have a session 0 and do like a CATS type thing, which is concept, aim, tone, and subject matter. It's a methodology that in the 200-word RPG contest from a few years ago, this guy came up with, before you start a game, make sure you always talk about these 4 things type of thing, right? Just to get that level set, get everybody on the same page. That, I think, irons out a lot of the wrinkles that can occur later. But you're right, when you have a game that's definitely going off the rails, things are just not working. I always do try to understand, sort of from an analytical standpoint, like what's at the heart of this? Are these 2 people just incompatible? Is the fact that, and it can be as simple as this person over here is posting 10 times a day, and that person posts once a week. And the guy who posts once a week is pissed off because the narrative has blown past him. I actually haven't seen this on Gamersplain that much, but on other play-by-post sites, it's a real problem where 2 or 3 people will post like mad, and there's 2 or 3 people who are posting maybe once or between 3 and 4 times a week type of thing. So we're not posting slowly, but there are pages of narrative that's getting generated and decisions that are being made, rooms that are getting explored if the GM is not preventing that from happening. So understanding that level, I think, of the conflict and what's not working, I think is where I would start. What else have I got for notes here? Always be open and honest with yourself and the player. Stop and talk about it, right? So if it feels gitchy and a little bit weird, chances are other people think it is too. So I would take a timeout. In fact, I will often, live or play by post, I'll very often just say, hey, how's everybody doing? What are you thinking? So whether I finish a chapter, it'd be like, as a GM, do I need to be doing anything differently? Is everybody happy with how the game's going? And you can often surface some of those things that you may not even be aware of in those discussions where people are like, I thought we were going to be doing something very different than what you ended up doing. And that may even get back to that whole discussion of I want more action, or, I thought we were going to get experience points for doing X, Y, and Z. It might be very fundamental type stuff, right? Yeah, I mean, with the idea of people playing at different paces, one thing I've done successfully is separate them into different groups. So I think you talked in your first series with a couple people about how good play by post is at splitting the party, right? No problem. At the table, ouch. In play by post, cool. You have a bunch of solo scenes if you want to. It's more work for the GM, but it works really well. I have successfully taken those 2 or 3 people who are like running like rabbits in terms of how they're posting, and the people who are slower, and you separate them into 2 different tasks. There's some work to do around matching up the sort of the timetables that they're on, but I found it works pretty well to do that. But by that point, you've identified the problem, and that's more of a solution type of thing, right? What else have I got? Yeah, really, you know what? Don't be afraid to shut the game down. If you've got those sort of things, or stop playing. So if you're in a game and you're like, wow, this isn't for me. And I've done this relatively recently where I've just decided my expectations, I didn't arrive with the right expectations. I just don't dig the style of thing that we're doing. This isn't the game's too fast for me. The game's too slow for me. I try to make some adjustments to try to make it work. I will say that I don't just back right out, but I'm not afraid to say this doesn't work and let's fold the game up. Especially if nobody's like, no, we really want to keep playing. If everybody's ambivalent or agreed that there's some issues, fold it up, play a different game.
Yeah, and I think that's an important one. There's this idea, and people have said this before, like if something's not working, then they feel like this pressure to stay involved, right? And then they're not enjoying it. They're not making the game better by staying in it because they're only partially engaged. And if
Absolutely.
if the GM is that way, then why are you even running it? And what ends up happening then, if those internal hurts pile up too much, is people will just leave, right? They just leave the site, not even just the game, right?
Yeah.
And like I've soured the well now too long. It's all in your head, right? But I've burnt too many bridges. I'm going to leave, and if I do come back, it'll be with a different username. That does happen, and so that all comes from that inability to just walk away and just say, let's be open and honest with your GM, with your other players, and just say, listen, this isn't what I want.
Yeah, and I think you can avoid a lot of that seriously upfront by playing with people whose style that you already know and like, or that you communicate well with, so you can all get on the same page. I'm all aboard playing with brand new people and bringing more people onto the site and all the rest, right? But in those cases, you really got to be careful, I think, about laying out the expectations for the posting rate, the tone of the game, how long you plan to play. I think I've seen you do it and others do it where you're like, I'm planning on running this until like until 2022, through the end of the year type of thing. So you set some boundaries on what people's expectations are, I think can help with all that sort of stuff. But you will, I don't know, I've already seen it a few times on Gamers Playing, and every other site I've played on, you always get into these things where tempers flare, people just have different styles. I've got some GMs that I just know now that I'm like.
Next up, WarDomo.
I think patience is a common theme across a lot of these conversations. Patience and persistence. So just kind of keep pinging the forum. Make sure people know that someone is still waiting on a response. Because what I've found happens is you get hung up with someone is not participating, and then people don't want to like move the story past that person because that's rude, right? But then they stop posting. The person that originally stopped posting is now not posting. You as the GM, like, you're waiting for everybody. So I think you have to have, well, now I'm making this up as I'm speaking, but what I think you need to try and do is have that conversation earlier, probably when the game starts, and just set some expectations of beyond just posting limits, because that's nice. Posting, say, hey, everybody, what do we? Everybody says once a day or 5 times a week or whatever, and then you always fall off that. But just having the expectation of like, look, if this is going over a week and I haven't heard from anybody, I'm going to move it along, or, I'll try to reach out to you, but something, because if they're not going to move it forward, you have to, or it will die. That if you lose that inertia, or momentum, I'm not good at physics, whatever it is that, you get this negative feedback cycle where it just will grind to a halt if someone doesn't break it. And I think it's incumbent on the GM for it to be you.
Yeah, that's for sure. I've seen games where there's just one player who is super motivated and keeps it running, and it even goes so far as to recruit players to replace them for the GM.
Yeah.
And the GM is perfectly capable of doing that, but hey, you've got a willing assistant, so
Yeah. I don't know, this may sound bad. I think another thing that can help, maybe not help, but maybe a preventative measure, is I think the easier it is to get into the game, the higher the likelihood you're going to get a couple of people that are very excited and then never post. That's a side benefit I've found of some of the Exalted games, is if you can get through the character creation period, which can take a while, then you're probably going to play because you're invested now. Whereas, 5th ed, everybody's got like 6 characters they've already rolled up in the hopper ready to go. Like, oh, and if not, okay, I'm a dwarf bard. Okay, got it. And so, what's your name? I don't know, Dwarf 3. That's my name. So I think having a little bit of investment can go a long way. And then even then you're still dealing with everybody in real life.
Next up, BedzoneII. So in Tech Noir / the Sprawl, we discovered after a while that it wasn't working.
Yep.
We weren't posting, you weren't posting. It was, we were posting different things. I don't know. And
we were.
so at some point we discussed it and decided to collapse the game. But do you have any tips for resurrecting a game or dealing with a game that's beginning to flag? And
I think
you're trying to rescue it?
I think that's one of the most important questions anybody can, and everybody will have to think about on PvP more than in real life, I think, right? Because that, again, we know the trend. We start games. Again, I'm generalizing, maybe some people know better, but I'm thinking that the majority of games don't get to fruition. They don't complete, right? A good number of games end for some reason or other. The main reasons we know, right? Player dropout, or GMs having to drop out, whether they ghost or whether they simply have no more time for that game and so on. Those reasons, of course, are inevitable, typically, because if a player needs to leave or the GM needs to go, well, he just has to say, or they just have to say, I got to go, and then that's it. It'd be nice if they told us they wanted to go, because sometimes people ghost, and then that's too bad on us. It affects the game, of course, when you have too few players, of course, right? If you're down to 2 left and then everybody else is ghosted, you can't do very much about it. However, I think one of the things, the more pertinent, interesting question is, how do you know when a game is dying?
Yeah.
Right? How do you know when a game isn't going to work out? The clues could be posting, of course, but I think you can pick up clues earlier than that. In other words, you can pick up clues from whether you think your players are getting something from the game, or whether, if you're the GM, whether you're getting something from the game. In other words, it's okay to man up and say, I wanted to run this game. I think I've got it laid out, but it isn't working out the way I want it to work out. And like I said, you man up because you just have to ask your players, is this the experience you're getting? Because if it's not, then I'm prepared to either change up, right, or close shop. It's okay to say that, I think. It requires a bit of trust. You hope that your players will do the same thing. You hope your players will also say, instead of ghosting, right, to say, I'm not really getting the experience I want to get from the game I'm playing. Because I mean, we're all adults here, and a good number of us are very experienced players. There's no wrong in saying this game doesn't feel right, right? I'm not sure where we're going with this. And then somebody can say, can it be fixed or can it not be fixed? Yeah. I think that's fundamentally a communication issue. If we could do that, a lot of games, we could do that, and the recognition that, that's why I prefaced what I prefaced earlier, and the recognition that not all games come to completion, right? Then it's okay for a group of gamers at a table or at a virtual table to say, we've had enough of this game. I think we've played as much as we want to play from here. We're not going to finish the story, but that's okay, right? Let's wrap up.
Yeah.
I think it's very reasonable for any of us to say that. Right. As far as Resurrection is concerned, I don't know though on PvP. If you've closed shop, I think that's typically about it. I'm not sure anybody's going to come back and restart a game. I think, again, I don't have the stats on this, or I think there have been some requests for either players or GM when they come on board and say, or players, for example, looking for a new GM. I don't know what the mileage on that is. I don't know if they've succeeded and therefore the game has, resumed successfully as a result, or the vice versa, when DMs come on board and they say, we need some new players, whether or not they're able to pull that off. Yeah. My take on that part, oh, sorry, were you gonna?
No, go ahead.
Okay. My take on that part is, I don't know if I'm doing it right, but it is something to think about. Again, something you don't worry about in real life. In PvP, you can have a rotating cast, I think. You can write stories for which people can come and go, right? You just have to make suitable excuses for it, of course, right? You cook up in-game reasons for why a character has left or died and so on. Dark Sun game being a case in point, some players have left. We can pretend that they are NPCs somewhere. Of course, we can still keep them, weave them back into the story if they wanted to return. We can add new players at appropriate junctures if you want. That's always not too difficult to do in the first place, right? You bump into a new player in the tavern, you save somebody from being prisoner somewhere, right? They join your party. There are tropes for that, of course. Yeah, but I think PvP allows for this. In other words, players to come and go. Again, back to the so I digressed on this because back to the main point, which is if the communication between DM and players is as follows, you could in general say this game's reached its end, or a specific player could say, I've had enough of this game, not in a negative way, right? I've played all I want to play about this. How can I politely leave? No offense to anyone else, and thank you for the experience. Perhaps DMs can say, or GMs can say, all right, I mean, thank you for playing and thank you for your last year of your life where, you posted at great length here. You want to move on and try something else? Please go for it, right? Let's find a way to still tell the story without your presence, and I'll add somebody else to the mix and see what happens. So players entering, exiting ought to be a thing in PvP, without too much hassle if a DM is prepared for that to happen. Yeah,
I think that's a really good point. And opening up the conversation where you say to the GM, what I want from the game has been accomplished. It's been fulfilled. I want to think about an exit strategy. How do we work together so that the game survives my character leaving?
Yeah.
Right? If you're willing to commit to a few more weeks of helping the GM exit your character out gracefully, then you're going to do everybody a service. And so opening up that conversation politely with the GM and say, let's talk about an exit strategy. The GM, that gives the GM a lot more tools than if you just, throw down a smoke bomb and like, I'm out.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I'm also wondering whether that's the kind of thing GMs can say even at the start of the game. Because of course the GM, when it starts the game, lays out his expectations. The expectations, of course, are we'll play this out until such a point, right? Until we finish the module or until we achieve something. You could always say that. Or a GM could very well say, I'm starting out this game because I want to try a new system, but I don't really know where we're going. And people are happy to play that too, right? That's also happened before. Or let's play a game and then let's see, let's see whether we hit certain objectives or not. I wonder whether we can say things like, because we can anticipate a game may take a year or 2 years, right? We can say, I also want to hear from the players what you hope to get out of this game. I think we typically ask that, of course. At the early stages, players may generally say, well, we'll play along and see what happens. But you could signal the openness to that conversation that, once you discover more and more as you play this game, I'd like to know whether you are getting something out of this game or not. How much are you getting out of this game? Do you see yourself progressing in a certain way? Because then that gives you some early clues as to whether the player wants to play on or not. Very much so, yeah. Some other things you could do in system to resolve this is allowing for PC change. In other words, you've had enough of playing a fighter, you want to play a mage. Maybe there's some way to fix that, because that allows them to continue playing even though they want to try a new system, they want to try this new character type, but somewhere along the way the character type isn't really working out for them. Can we swap to something else? I mean, I think we should be trying to accommodate that, perhaps where it makes sense, because then that gives a player more options to say, I want to play on.
Yep.
Because there are other things I can try. If this game, look, it's a huge commitment. If this game is going to run 2 years or 3 years, I don't mind trying a warlock, and then I want to try a ranger, and then want to try a pally. That's okay, I think. Somehow you can explain it, I suppose, in game.
Yeah. Yeah, and we try and create all kinds of ways for that to be built into the system. For example, you can have a nexus, maybe a favorite tavern or something, and all adventures start there.
Yeah.
And the room is filled with adventurers, and whoever leaves on the next one is basically just whoever you're picking.
Yeah.
Right? So I want to try a paladin. Oh, there, he's in the room. And
right, right. Go ahead, right?
Yeah.
Dark Sun game, Takari, I think I've let her die as a psionic, as a scion, and she's come back as some sort of undead. Let's see how that plays out. I mean, that should be fun too, right?
Yeah.
That gives the so that Falconloft can bash heads rather than try to mentally screw with them, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and that's always in a magic heavy system, or a system like Altered Carbon, where you're swapping bodies. Like you're basically taking a personality matrix and putting it in a new shell. Your ability to radically change your character is there, right?
Yep. Like
if you pray to your god in your Forgotten Realms and say, you know what, Tyr, you've been a great paladin god. I'd really like to try my hands at the dark arts and want to be a warlock. And lightning hits you, and bam, you're a warlock, right? Magic solves a lot of problems.
yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Or the game that we're playing with Kalajel, Keep on the Borderlands. I mean, we had a couple of people get killed in the first foray out. So yeah, come back to the tavern. Let's get some new characters and we'll go out again. That's okay, even if that's okay, I think. Yep. I'm mindful of this because, again, I'm reiterating the point. I'm mindful of this because if a bunch of players are going to commit to your game, on PvP especially, it does feel to me they're going to be playing for 2 or 3 years, right? Some people don't mind doing that same thing over 3 years. Some people may, and it's permissible, may find it boring. Right, despite all your best efforts, or despite all their best efforts at making the game interesting, putting vested interest in growing their character and so on. So, if these are people you like to play with, it's worth considering how they want to take the game as well, which direction they want to take the game.
I've been running this Savage Worlds game set in Rifts, Rifts being the old
Yeah, of course.
game system from the 90s.
I'm going to interrupt you. Has anybody else run Rifts? I mean, at all here? I don't think so, right? It's just too hard, I think.
This is the original Rifts game. I don't.
Yeah, of course.
Sorry,
I interrupted you. Yeah.
I've played Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I think uses the same system, but not on Gamers Plane.
Okay.
So in Rifts, the setting is Atlantis. So this continent shows up in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, stretches from Cuba to Africa. It's 3,000 miles wide. It's huge, right? And so they send a group of Tomorrow Legion soldiers to explore Atlantis. It's like, we don't know anything about it. We don't have like spy satellites or anything. So we're just going to send some people there, find out about it. So now I'm at a problem in that if a player wants to change characters, there's no real way for that to happen.
Right, of course.
So KCC, one of the South Korean user, he wanted to. He started off playing what's called a ley line walker, which is a kind of mage, and after a while he's like, this isn't really as satisfying as I thought it'd be. I'd like to switch out to something easier, maybe a combat thing. So at the last minute, I just put a combat cyborg on the boat.
Okay.
And so as they got to the shore, I'm like, okay, well, the combat cyborg also survives. It's just an NPC, right? But I'm thinking at some point, if he wanted to play the combat cyborg, there it is. I brought it.
Right.
Here's your backup character. But
and that's a good solution, right? It is a good solution.
So I haven't put any personality into him. He's just this robot protecting a couple scientists. But anyway, that's a solution that for a problem that there isn't a tavern. They're way out in the middle of nowhere. Parachuting in a new character is a real problem.
Yeah. I think that works pretty much.
So if anybody in the game wants to switch to a combat cyborg, I can accommodate that once.
Right. Or at least requires early planning. In other words, if you want to, you could add other NPCs as you go along. If somebody says, I'm thinking of a switch. DM could consider setting it up. Sure.
Yeah. Now, in the game, it's not going to be that big of a problem. It's a big continent. There's lots of people that all over the multiverse are there, including slaves that have been captured from North America or Europe or other parts of Earth or other parts of the cosmos. So anything you wanted to play, you could just find, right? It's like, oh, you escaped your harsh conditions and you find the party. So
typically hardest to achieve when it's a dungeon crawl. Right? There are 5 of you in a dungeon. You can't magically disappear somebody and make somebody else magically reappear. It's very hard. Yeah.
We're playing a game of Frontier Space, which is a most light version of 80s TSR game. What was it called?
TSR?
It's a space game.
Alternative?
No.
What's that?
No, it was one of the D&D clones. No, it wasn't a clone. It was
if it's 80s, what is it? Gamma World, Star Frontiers, one of those?
Star Frontiers.
Star Frontiers. Okay.
So Frontier Space is Star Frontiers. It's exactly the same aliens.
Everything. Oh yeah. Okay. I haven't come across it. I'll go look it up. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, and it's just a different system. It's an OSR system. Anyway, the adventure we had is we crash land on a planet. We find this other ship that's long buried in the dirt, right? So we're exploring it. Then a player leaves. It's like, okay, well, we can kill off your player. That's easy to accomplish. But there's literally nobody else on the planet. There's no way to bring in a new character, right? And so I told Kalajel, I was like, well, what if there's cryopods, right? And so we unfreeze somebody. It's like that's a new character. Anyway, it's a real problem when you're in a remote location like a dungeon and you want to replace a character.
I suppose. Because ghosting is a thing, and well, PvP in general, of course, right? Yeah. People do drop out. Yeah. I think people who are on the on Gamers Plane, we're quite used to that idea. I think we're all mentally prepared for people to drop out. That's okay. Not, I wouldn't say it's okay.
Here's Skeptical Stun. Do you have any, have you seen any good tips with, a game like our Numenera Knights game is a little bit slow. It's kind of, we've hit a rough patch. I don't know that it's flagging, but it's certainly got some issues. Do you have any tips that you've seen enacted to kind of resurrect the game?
I don't think you'd want to hear it. Dip out. I mean, that's the easy. If you're a player and you're like, man, this is not working out. Like, there's a certain decision you need to make where you're like, do I want to be responsible for this or not? Like, if you're a player and it's lagging, you have to decide if it's worth your time to resurrect it. And if it's not, just bail. Like, if it sucks for everybody, then there's no point in going through that effort. But if it's something that means a lot to you, then yeah, like posting more and calling on people by name and checking up on people, like hitting them up on Discord or on the site, like, hey, I haven't seen you online in like a week. Are you okay? Everything fine? I mean, trying to engage other people directly. I think as much as I think every game I've had has an out of character channel or thread or something, and we kind of use it as kind of BS, but I think BSing in out of character, whether about the game or about just nonsense in real life, I think it keeps people involved in a way. And that's something that you can't really, it's hard to do in PvP, but in real life, yeah, you talk in a Discord chat or in a text chat on your phone with your friends about what's going on in the game, and it keeps everybody kind of involved. It keeps them, there's a word for it I can't think of, but
Engaged.
Thank you. That's exactly it. Yeah, it keeps them engaged to what's going on. I think that's a big part of it. If you can keep people engaged, whether it's through out of character or like just keeping things rolling in the game, even if you're asking people directly, what do you want to do next? That's as much as you can do, but it sucks because you can't force anybody to do something they don't want to do. If somebody's having a hard week, you can't force them to get online and post, or if they're just not into the game, if they're realizing this system sucks and they don't like it, you're not gonna be able to force them to continue.
Yeah, for sure. No, those are good comments there. Like I've often said that slow posting just kills play by post. Like, if you neglect, really, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not even slow. It's like we were talking about this earlier today. It's inconsistency.
Yeah.
If you establish it's going to be once every 2 days when you get a post, that's fine. We'll slow post it. It'll drag, but that's fine. But it's when it's like 2 today and then 3 days off and then another one and then like a week, and like you don't know what's going on. You've essentially mentally written off that game entirely.
Yeah.
Like wink, wink sort of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Like there's the one game we were involved in where, the GM is just largely kind of expected. I thought he was gone, right? Then he comes back,
Yeah, we all did.
Posts like, and then like 2 weeks later, he's like posts again. And what was the most recent one? Like editing post or something?
Yeah. God bless him. Like work in progress. That was it. Like work in progress. I'll be done with this tonight. That was like 3 days ago, which is unintentionally hilarious to me for some reason. But yeah, exactly that. Like he was gone for like during character creation for like a week, and then he was back for like 3 posts, and he was gone again. It kills it. Like they set the expectation at the beginning of the game, it was gonna be like once a day. But if you're all over the place and with no explanation of it, then and I say this as I'm DMing a game that I'm not posting consistently in because I'm finding it difficult to come up with what's coming next, and I'm avoiding posting. Like I'm the problem that I'm identifying here. I see that. Like I see myself in the mirror, pointing at myself in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's a huge part of being the GM, right? Is if you don't have a good roadmap forward, it's hard to lead your players down that path. So if they're not, walking with you side by side, then the metaphor just gets really stretched and confusing.
Yeah. And it's man, I thought being play by post be like easier DMing real life game. No, it's the same thing. It's just extended over a longer period of time. Like you still have to dedicate however many hours to planning everything out, and I just don't have it in me lately. Like especially because I'm on this weird shifting schedule. Like at the moment I'm getting up for work. I got to be at work by 5:30, and then in a week and a half it'll be 9:30 p.m. to 5:30 a.m. And then a month after that it changes again. And like I'm tired all the time because of it. I just don't feel creative.
Yeah.
Because you're just mentally dragging. It's like you don't have that mental spring in your step that's pushing you to do the next thing, that's giving you thoughts without even trying. Literally tonight I was making dinner, and it's really hard to focus on whatever's coming next because I'm just mentally wiped. Like I'm making coffee and I dump the coffee grounds into the sink. I'm like, what am I doing? Because you're just not able to connect the thoughts the same way. It's just that lack of sleep and like being mentally stressed makes it so hard to be creative. So it's DMing while you're dealing with stuff like that becomes just such a slog. It's like we were talking about earlier. It's probably better just to outsource it to a module or something. They've already done all the hard work.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I'm running this game of Pathfinder. It's using my favorite adventure paths, the Mummy's Mask. So it's Egyptian archaeology, I just love all that stuff. But it's very dungeon intensive, right? Pathfinder modules can be very just like, here's a dungeon, here's another dungeon, here's a dungeon.
Yeah.
There's some plot connecting them. And even like, it's like you're going to go to the library. Oh, the library's a dungeon. Right?
Gotcha. Library's haunted.
Yeah, there literally is a library dungeon in one of the books. So it's easy to run because all you really got to do is tell them what's on the other side of the door.
Well, that said, what do you think about dungeons in PvP? This is something I've talked about with a bunch of people, and I'm kind of 50-50, or I've gotten 50-50 results on what people think about it. I'm of the mind, I've run a couple of dungeons. Every time I've gotten into a legitimate dungeon in PvP, it's died. Because it's so hard to maintain that, like, you're in a room, here's what the room looks like, which way do you want to go? You're in a room, oh, there's a bad guy, you fight, which way do you want to go? Like, it's so hard to keep interest that way. Do you find that dungeons actually can be run this way?
Yes. And I think I'm speaking as a GM who doesn't like dungeons. I don't use them in real life. I don't think they make sense. I was like, what rooms underground? This doesn't make any sense. Who built this? Like, why? Right. It's like, well, there was a lich. He's a lich. He's got better things to do than carve rooms from rock. But anyway, so in real life, if there's more than 5 dungeons in 5 rooms in a dungeon, I'm bored before they're in the 5th room.
Even in real life, like where you can be through a 10-room dungeon in one night.
For sure. Yeah. So, and now Antiproduct, World War I game run by Tenrec, was a game that was really flagging. Like it basically died, right? And you single-handedly lifted them on your shoulders and carried them around, recruit new players, and now it's been going strong for a while.
Tenrec included, actually.
Yeah.
I had to lift him by the collar, and I may or may not have used the boot there as well. Yeah, but it had to be done. I mean, I've been seeing my DM that that has gotten me through character creation step by step, explaining things to me, bouncing ideas back and forth on Discord. I mean, my chats with my DM before we start actually playing have been, one would say, exhausting for him. But he was really patient and wanted things to start. So when I saw things suddenly dying out without an explanation or saying like, okay, we got to back out or something. Things happen in real life, obviously. I mean, people have children and problems, obviously. So, but it's like when you're playing in real life, you wouldn't just ghost your friends. You wouldn't not pick up the phone or avoid them for indefinitely. You
Though
would say,
that
hey,
does happen.
sorry.
Though that does happen in real life gaming too.
Yeah, that's unfortunate, really. But my point is that you don't have to explain everything. You have your problems or anything, it's up to you. But say, I would be unavailable, I can't continue. I don't enjoy the game anymore. I don't enjoy your style of DMing. I don't enjoy my co-player's style because he's teasing, maybe is going a bit over the edge for me. Not because he's doing it or she's doing it in purpose, but someone might misunderstand. I mean, in the original cast of War Voices, I've had this banter with another player, or me, not myself really, but our characters have had a banter between them, one being a former police officer and the other being a thief of sorts. So we had this little banter, and at that point there was this thing that had come up in the GP Discord. So I went on our games Discord server and made it clear that I'm doing this just for giggles, and if it's offending or if it's getting you uncomfortable with the game, just say it and I will stop it immediately. There's no hard feelings. I'm not trying to make you not enjoy the game. I mean, I completely understand that. So that's why I strongly believe that you have to be vocal about your feelings when you're playing.
Presenting Remnant. How do you figure out when a game is kind of like in trouble? Like the players have lost interest, or maybe it's just flagging, or maybe they're confused, or all of that.
Communication and feedback. We didn't really get around fully to it, doing a concept, aim, and tone. It's really something you should do at the beginning, like in your 0 session. I did it after my one shot for the pulp game, where it wasn't really pulp, it was more noir style because it was more investigation versus getting into fights and this, that, and the other. It's like, well, you pick two people that don't really know how to fight. You literally took hindrances that make them look mild-mannered, and you're both curious, so you have the investigation version of ADD.
Yeah.
So I'm not really going to have you fight like gangsters because you're going to get beat up. Or you're going to shoot one of them and kill them. And then it gets super weird. But yeah, there's some signs out there, like, but there's always some reason for it. You just may not know what it is. It might be you start a game this weekend and everybody's really excited to play, and all of a sudden 4 weeks from now you have a lot of US players that well, they're not really online. I mean, because Thanksgiving weekend, there's football, there's food, there's food coma, there's Black Friday shopping, there's putting up holiday decorations, possibly. And then there's a max exodus from the site because it's the holidays and we're just going to hang out with friends and do other stuff. People may not say something. People might say something on the site. You might have situations where, you know, the game isn't interesting or it's a rough slugfest. I think, what is it? The Realms of Tyraneth game where you were in as a, not actually the princess from Frozen, but someone kind of similar.
Yep.
That fight really got longer than I expected it to, because you were pretty much just fighting souped up villagers that really couldn't hit or do a lot of damage, but they died easily because they didn't care about dying because they were pretty much alive but zombies. They were pretty much were creatures that were berserk, that were just, their mindset was just infect more people. Because after they died, there'd be more people that got infected. So that game kind of stalled, I think, because it was such a long. The guy that was really good at taking a hit couldn't really hit anything, and since it's not an MMO game, like if there's 3 or 5 guys wailing on him and that's complicated, they're gonna look at, well, these other characters are here and they're probably not as hard to hit.
Yeah.
I'm gonna attack them.
Yeah.
I mean, it didn't help the fight was like in the middle of the night and it was like you couldn't see like the root system for the scrub area and it was hard terrain to run around in, and these guys were like on all 4x4 vehicles doing attack a titan type attacks without really being good at. They can get to you, they just couldn't really do anything, but they were there just in your face, and that's stressful considering how they looked, which was horrific.
Yeah, I know. I think at one point, people kind of disappeared in that game. There was just these long silences, and part of that was me too, because I think my character Harriet at some point had just been like hammered into nothing. Like she could do nothing. Like she was just like basically on the ground, almost unconscious. And it was this, and this lasted for weeks or maybe even a month, right? Where I was just yeah.
I was like, man, this is bad. Well, she's down on the ground. That's easy prey. If I was a monster, I wouldn't. I'd move on to something that was moving because I'm cat-like. I see sudden movement, then I'll come back.
Yeah.
That one was actually supposed to end a lot quicker because of how triumphs worked. I was pulling another one showed up. I don't know if y'all realize that, but if there was any time like I got a triumph on something, another ineffective civilian would show up in combat and flail. I rolled a lot. I didn't get a lot of hits in on the guy that was really tanky, but another one would show up. Or if you guys rolled a despair, another one would show up. And that's what it was supposed to be, like a fight where at the end you found the boy out there that you were looking for, and there was like one of the were creatures was like had him on the ground and was biting him, but like, and he was screaming, and you're like in a situation where like you notice the creature has its teeth on its mouth on like the kid's like shoulder, and part of his arm is in its mouth. And it's not biting down. It was actually supposed to be, as you guys figure out, it's his mom. So do you like save the kid or beat the crap out of the mom and kill her? Because she's mindless now, but she's trying to like not kill her child, the younger one. And then there was because it was taking so long, Green left. He would have gone back to have to tell the goat Gertrude what happened with his mom. You know, this really big male orc.
Yeah.
But then you would have seen like the old hag because they gave her the thing from the Chimera. She went from the old hag to like hourglyph figure in this bathing suit all the time. Like, this is great. Thanks, guys. I'm not going to tell you what I did, but it's not illegal out here because there's no rules against it. Did she just metamorphosize her body permanently, like not through magic? Possibly. So it was supposed to be like a super gray area for where things are going on. But depending on what you guys did for the adventures would, gear toward what kind of place you wanted. But it's stalled, and that happens.
Yeah. And here's WhtKnt. Tips for resurrecting or breathing life into such a game?
I think the only thing I can recommend there is boost the action. If you hit a lull, throw something at them, even if it's just a single orc or a small band of kobolds. Anything to get the action moving again. And once you get it kick-started, then you can go on with the game.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've done that. I've often said, the players are just kind of like not really posting, not really engaging in the narrative. I'm like, oh, roll initiative.
Yeah. I've actually started off games with roll initiative before.
Yeah. So a lot of those suggestions were pretty spot on, I think. Communication is obviously key in making sure the game is playing it the way that you want it to be played, and more importantly, that your players want it to be played. Because if you're all playing with different expectations, then somebody's not going to be happy. But there's some other tricks too. For example, like Stephen King said when he had writer's block, just go for the gross out, roll initiative. This is Krolok, and thank you for joining me on Gamers Explain. I know you've already hit like and subscribe, so I won't ask again. Thanks.